You need to leave. Now. This isn't a shelter for kids who wander in off the street. We're a luxury hotel, not a daycare." Those were the exact words. Loud, sharp, and delivered with the kind of disgust that could peel paint off a wall. The front desk manager didn't whisper. She didn't pull the boy aside. She didn't even lower her voice. Instead, she stood tall in her navy blazer, voice echoing through the marble lobby of the Monarch Grand Hotel in Boston, and humiliated a child, right in front of dozens of well-dressed guests. Some people glanced over, eyebrows raised. Others looked away, pretending not to hear. But everyone felt it. That instant. Awful silence that follows when something cruel is said out loud and no one knows what to do. And at the center of it all stood a 12-year-old black boy, clutching the strap of his brown leather backpack, dressed neatly in a gray blazer, a crisp white shirt, and khaki pants, with shoes polished and posture perfect. His name was Micah Turner. He had arrived just minutes earlier to check in for his mother's surprise birthday celebration, one his father had planned for weeks. He wasn't lost. He wasn't loitering. He wasn't even early. But none of that mattered to the woman at the front desk who looked at his brown skin, his youthful face, and his quiet presence, and decided, on sight, that he didn't belong. What happened next would expose a deep, quiet kind of prejudice too many people ignore, and it would unravel everything this staff thought they understood about power, presence, and privilege. But before we get into it, where are you watching from? If this story touches you, go ahead and hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that matters. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, just after 4:15 p.m., when Micah stepped through the tall glass doors of the Monarch Grand, one of Boston's most prestigious hotels, with its gold-trimmed walls, marble floors, and a grand chandelier imported from Italy. The lobby felt like a museum of wealth. Elegant guests stood near the concierge, some sipping complimentary champagne, others scrolling their phones while waiting for bellhops to retrieve their luggage. Micah didn't flinch. He walked with confidence toward the check-in counter, his father's words in his head. "You walk like you belong, son, because you do." And Micah did just that. He approached the front desk with a quiet, polite smile. The receptionist on duty, a man in his 40s with a name tag that read Brian, looked up briefly, confused. "Can I help you?" he asked, not unkindly, but with the tone adults often use with children, half distracted, slightly dismissive. "Yes, sir," Micah said calmly. "The Turner family has a reservation. I'm here to check in. My father said the key would be under Elijah Turner." Brian paused, glanced at the screen, then furrowed his brow. "Elijah Turner?" he repeated, as if unsure. "You're his son?" "Yes, sir. He's arriving shortly. I just came ahead to check in for the party." Micah's voice was clear, respectful, and rehearsed. But something in Brian shifted. His shoulders tensed. He looked toward the back office. A few seconds later, a woman emerged, mid-30s, straight blonde hair pulled back tight, tablet in one hand, a hotel radio clipped to her belt. Her name tag read Rachel Whitman, guest services manager. She glanced at Micah once, just once, and everything in her face hardened. "Is there a problem here?" she asked Brian, already assuming the answer. "This young man says he's here to check in for the Turner reservation." Brian said, "Says his father's name is Elijah." Rachel tilted her head and narrowed her eyes at Micah. Then she stepped forward, arms folded, her voice crisp. "I'm going to need you to wait outside," she said firmly. "This is a private space. We don't allow unaccompanied minors to hang around the lobby." Micah blinked. "But I'm not hanging around. I was told to pick up the key." My dad's. Sir, Rachel cut in. We don't allow anyone to use our facilities without proper identification. And quite frankly, this isn't the place for unsupervised children. You're making guests uncomfortable. A couple nearby turned their heads. A white man in a gray suit leaned in to whisper something to the woman next to him. Micah felt a familiar tightness in his chest. The one that came when teachers talked down to him, when store clerks followed him with their eyes, when strangers crossed the street at the sight of him. Still, he stood tall. I'm not trying to cause trouble. Ma'am, I'm just here for my mom's birthday. The ballroom's reserved under my family's name, I was told. Rachel cut him off again. Anyone can say that, she snapped. You don't look like someone staying here. Now please, leave the lobby. And with that, she motioned to security. A tall man in a navy jacket approached. Not aggressive, not violent, just firm. I'll walk you outside, son, he said, already assuming Micah didn't belong. And so the boy who had come early, dressed respectfully, carrying nothing but a backpack and a birthday card, was quietly, yet publicly, escorted from a hotel his own family had spent over $10,000 reserving for the weekend. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, walked outside, and sat on the bench just beyond the glass doors, looking out at the bustling Boston street. Then, after a moment of stillness, he pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and tapped the name at the top of the list, Dad. What happened after that call would shake the foundation of the Monarch Grand, and every person in that lobby would soon understand exactly who they had turned away. The glass doors of the Monarch Grand rotated slowly behind him, but Micah Turner didn't look back. Not yet. He just sat outside, still as stone, the Boston air brushing past his blazer like it knew he didn't belong inside. Behind him, that lobby still buzzed, people sipping cucumber water, checking in for weekend getaways, laughing without a care in the world. None of them had spoken up. None had questioned why a well-dressed black boy had been escorted out like he was some kind of trespasser. But before the call, before justice had a chance to arrive, Micah had to endure one more round of quiet, public shame. Just 5 minutes earlier, before he was forced outside, it had all unfolded in plain view. Rachel Whitman, the guest services manager, hadn't stopped with the order to leave. No, she'd turned the moment into a performance. This is a private establishment, she repeated, louder now, as if declaring a rule to the entire room. We don't tolerate wanderers in our lobby. Her voice had that calculated firmness, not quite shouting, but sharp enough to silence the air. Micah stood frozen. I'm not wandering, he said, softly, still holding the strap of his backpack like a lifeline. My family has a reservation. We booked the ballroom for my mother's birthday. But Rachel only raised a brow. And I suppose you're the party planner? She said with a smirk, looking him up and down. Or maybe the DJ. That one landed hard. The couple standing a few feet away chuckled under their breath. Micah didn't respond, not because he didn't have the words, but because he knew, even at 12, that sometimes silence speaks louder than any comeback. Still, she pressed. You're welcome to call your guardian, Rachel said, emphasizing the word guardian like he was a lost child. But until then, you'll need to wait outside. We can't have non-guests lingering near the front desk. Just then, a tall white man stepped out of the elevator. Franklin Ward, a longtime VIP client, known by name to the staff. He wore a tailored gray suit, a gold watch, and the tired look of someone who'd traveled too much and listened too little. He glanced at Micah and muttered to the woman beside him. What's he even doing here? She shrugged, adjusting her designer handbag. Probably someone's kid got lost. Micah heard it, every word, but he didn't flinch. He turned to Rachel again. "The Skyview Ballroom was booked by Elijah Turner," he said slowly. "That's my father." Rachel folded her arms. "Anyone can say that," she replied, her tone now laced with that bitter cocktail of disbelief and condescension. "It's not enough to just say you belong. You have to prove it." Micah reached for his phone. "I can call him." "No need," Rachel interrupted. "We'll handle it." "Security?" She didn't even let him finish. The tall guard stepped forward, not with malice, but with rehearsed authority, the kind of presence that doesn't raise its voice, because it doesn't need to. "Sir," he said, calling Micah sir in the way adults sometimes do when they don't want to seem rude. But everything about the moment still was. "We're gonna need you to step outside while we confirm your story." Micah's throat tightened, but he nodded, because that's what his parents had taught him. Stay calm, be respectful, protect your name, even when others try to stain it. He turned, stepped out of the lobby, and sat quietly on the stone bench facing Boylston Street. Inside, the marble floors remained polished. The champagne stayed cold. The hotel buzzed along like nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had. Ava Chen, a server in her late 20s, had witnessed the whole thing. From her spot near the juice bar, she'd watched Micah walk in, speak politely, stand patiently. She'd also seen Rachel's reaction, the shift in posture, the tightening jaw, the way her voice got louder just when it didn't need to. Ava knew something felt off. She'd seen it before. A different tone for certain guests, a colder smile, a quicker assumption. But saying something? That was risky. Ava was still new, and Rachel ran her shift with the kind of tight grip that didn't leave room for questions. Still, Ava felt her phone buzz in her apron pocket. A reminder. Skyview Ballroom set up by 4:30. She glanced again at the lobby doors, now closed. She hadn't seen Micah do anything wrong. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't argued, and yet he was gone, and no one seemed to care. She tapped the internal messaging app quietly. A note to the Turner Group's support hotline. Anonymous. Potential issue at Monarch Grand. Possible racial profiling. Guest named Micah Turner removed without cause. Please advise. Then she locked her phone and went back to her tray of drinks. Heart racing. Outside. Micah sat with his elbows on his knees, trying to stay composed. A group of tourists walked past, one of them pointing at the hotel's tall doors. "That place is fancy," someone said. "Too fancy." Another laughed. Micah didn't look up. He was used to moments like this, not in this exact form, but the feeling of being questioned for existing in the wrong space. But this time felt different. He pulled out his phone again, thumb hovering over the screen. He stared at his father's name for a moment. Dad. Ice level. A private joke between the two of them. Something from when Elijah first became CEO of the Turner Legacy Group. Micah tapped the number and held the phone to his ear. It rang twice. Then a familiar voice. "Micah? What's wrong?" The boy kept his voice steady. "Dad, I got kicked out of the hotel. They said I didn't belong. I tried to tell them. I gave them your name, but they didn't believe me." A pause. Not silence, but that tight pause you only hear when someone powerful gets suddenly, unexpectedly furious. Elijah Turner didn't raise his voice either. "Are you outside now?" "Yeah. On the bench. Don't move. I'll be there in 5. The call ended. Micah tucked his phone away and exhaled slowly. The marble lobby still gleamed behind him, but everything inside was about to change. Micah Turner sat still on the stone bench outside the Monarch Grand, eyes lowered, phone resting loosely in his hands as the screen dimmed to black. The soft rumble of traffic moved behind him. Cars gliding past, the occasional honk, laughter from a group of college students walking down Boylston. But none of it reached him. His thoughts were locked on that call. It had lasted less than 30 seconds, just his voice and his father's. But in that half-minute, something shifted, not just in Micah, but soon, in the hotel, in the staff, in everyone who had stood by while he was turned away. Inside the grand lobby, the crystal chandelier still sparkled above clusters of guests checking in. A bride in a cream pantsuit held a bouquet near the elevator. 2 young men in tailored suits asked about spa availability. No one noticed the ripple coming, but it had already started, because 5 blocks away, Micah Turner, CEO of Turner Legacy Group and one of the most quietly powerful men in Boston, had stopped everything. He'd ended a board call mid-sentence. "Gentlemen, we'll reconvene later. Something's come up," he said, and that was all it took. His team knew not to ask. Elijah rose from his seat, adjusted his cufflinks, and turned to the man standing just outside his office, Harold Bennett, Vice President of Hotel Operations. "Grab the internal affairs file. We're going to the Monarch Grand," Elijah said firmly. Harold, a seasoned executive in his early 60s, nodded once, already moving. Elijah's assistant, Deanna, met them downstairs with a legal advisor in tow. "Do we know what happened?" she asked, breath quickening as she walked beside him. Elijah's jaw clenched slightly. "Micah was removed from the lobby," he said. "Rachel Whitman, that's the name he gave me. She didn't recognize him, told him he didn't belong." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight in his tone said enough. "I want eyes on all internal messages," he added. "If anyone on staff flagged this as a guest issue, I want a copy of it." Back at the Monarch, Ava Chen was still working her shift, tray in hand, eyes darting toward the front doors every few minutes. Her anonymous message had gone through. Just a few short lines sent quietly through the staff-only interface to Turner Group HQ. She wasn't even sure it would be read, but something inside her had urged her to press send. She hadn't grown up with privilege. She knew what it felt like to be assumed less. And watching that boy, polite, clear, never once raising his voice, get treated like a threat, it had gnawed at her since he left. Brian Colton, the front desk associate, stood stiffly behind the counter. Rachel Whitman had returned to the back office, sipping a decaf latte like nothing had happened. Her radio crackled with updates from the ballroom staff, florists arriving, and dinner prep underway. None of it mattered to her. She believed she'd done the right thing. She believed she'd followed protocol. But even she noticed the change in atmosphere when the sleek black Lincoln Navigator pulled up front at exactly 4:24 p.m. The doorman opened it slowly, confused at first, until Micah Turner stepped out, 6'3", salt and pepper beard trimmed to precision, dressed in a charcoal suit with subtle pinstripes and a navy silk tie. He didn't carry anger on his face. He didn't stride in with fire. But something about him, the posture, the composure, the deliberate calm, made the entire lobby hold its breath. Harold Bennett and the legal advisor followed, and then the moment crystallized. As Elijah approached the bench, Micah looked up, relief washing briefly over his face. "I'm okay," Micah said first. Standing up, Elijah rested a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "I know you are," he replied. "But this isn't..." Together, they walked through the revolving door. No one stopped them. No one dared. Brian, behind the desk, glanced up and froze mid-keystroke. Rachel emerged from the hallway just as Elijah approached the counter. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice still clipped, unaware of who she was speaking to. Elijah didn't answer at first. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and placed a matte black ID card onto the polished counter. The embossed letters read, Elijah Turner, Chief Executive Officer, Turner Legacy Group. Rachel blinked. I didn't realize. No, Elijah interrupted softly. You didn't. And that's the problem. He turned slightly, motioning toward the back. Please have all management staff present in the lobby within 5 minutes. Rachel hesitated. Sir, we're in the middle of... Now, Elijah said, with no need to raise his voice. Across the room, Ava Chen nearly dropped her tray. She wasn't sure what stunned her more, that her anonymous message might have triggered this, or that the man in front of her was that Elijah Turner. As hotel staff began murmuring and shifting in the background, Micah stood beside his father, not hiding anymore, not shrinking. Elijah glanced down at him, nodded once, then returned his gaze to the front desk. Your job was to welcome a child, he said to Rachel. Instead, you saw a stereotype. You heard politeness and read it as sarcasm. You saw neat clothes and assumed they weren't earned. Rachel flushed. Her words caught somewhere between apology and panic. I was trying to protect the lobby, she stammered. From who? Elijah asked, eyes never leaving hers. From my son? There was no yelling, no slamming of fists, just silence, thick as concrete, stretching between everyone who had witnessed the earlier scene and now had to sit with it. We'll discuss the consequences shortly, Elijah said. But first, we need to correct the record. And as he turned to face the entire staff, his presence filled that lobby in a way no chandelier ever could. Because sometimes, change doesn't begin with anger. It begins with calm, deliberate truth. And the truth had finally arrived. When Elijah Turner stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Monarch Grand Hotel with his son at his side, it wasn't just a man entering a building. It was a shift in the room's gravity. The polished marble lobby, which had hummed just moments earlier with the quiet comfort of luxury, seemed to still itself. Conversations softened. Footsteps paused mid-stride, and even the clinking of silver spoons on coffee saucers seemed to mute. He didn't rush, didn't strut, didn't need to. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with a soft navy tie and leather shoes that clicked softly with each step, Elijah radiated a calm, commanding presence, like someone who had nothing to prove, yet had already won. He walked like a man used to rooms that folded to attention without being told. But today wasn't about boardrooms or balance sheets. Today, it was about his son. Micah walked beside him, smaller in frame but just as composed, his eyes scanning the room he'd been removed from only 15 minutes earlier. But now, he wasn't alone. The same guests who had looked through him earlier now looked at him with cautious curiosity, as if realizing they might have misread the moment. Badly. Elijah approached the front desk slowly, where Rachel Whitman stood stiffly behind the counter, clipboard in hand, trying and failing to compose herself. She didn't recognize him at first, not with the child beside him, not in this context. Good afternoon, sir. How can I? Who's the manager on duty? Elijah asked without preamble, his tone firm but polite. Rachel blinked. That would be me, Rachel Whitman, guest services manager. She offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Is there a problem? Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and laid a sleek black ID card on the marble countertop, embossed in silver. It read, Elijah Turner, Chief Executive Officer, Turner Legacy Group. The Turner Legacy Group owned the hotel she worked in. Her jaw twitched, her breath caught. The color drained slightly from her face. I didn't realize. No, Elijah said quietly. You didn't. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation. He looked at her, not cruelly, not emotionally, but with the still gaze of a man who had built empires and dismantled excuses. Behind him, Harold Bennett and the company's legal advisor stepped forward. Rachel straightened. "Sir, I had no idea that the boy—" "Micah," Elijah interrupted. "His name is Micah Turner, my son, and he was here earlier to pick up our room key, which was already reserved, under his last name, which happens to be mine." There was no shouting, no grandstanding, just clarity delivered with precision. Rachel's face tightened. "I followed procedure, sir. We've had situations before where—" "Where what?" Elijah asked calmly. "Where a black child in a blazer makes you nervous?" Rachel's lips parted, but no sound came out. Guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Even Franklin Ward, the VIP lawyer who had earlier whispered his judgment, now stood by the elevator silently watching, arms folded, expression unreadable. Elijah looked around the room. "I'd like all staff involved in the earlier incident gathered in the lobby. Right now." Rachel hesitated. "Sir, the evening rush is—" "This will take precedence." Harold Bennett stepped forward, flipping open a leather binder. "Ms. Whitman, that's a direct instruction. We need Rachel Whitman, Brian Colton, and any security personnel who engaged with the minor guest between 4:15 and 4:30 p.m." His tone left no room for negotiation. Rachel gave a quick nod, throat dry, and tapped her earpiece. Within minutes, Brian Colton appeared from the back office, eyes wide. He stopped cold when he saw Elijah. I didn't know he was." "You didn't ask," Elijah said simply. "You didn't pause to wonder why a polite young man in dress clothes might be here alone. You assumed, and your assumption became policy." Elijah turned to face them all. Rachel, Brian, 2 uniformed security guards, and several staff who had been within earshot, but had said nothing. Micah stood to the side now, quietly, his small hands folded in front of him. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't ashamed. He was watching, learning. "You all had a choice today," Elijah continued, his voice steady. "To pause, to ask, to act with decency. You had a choice to see a child and offer help. Instead, you chose judgment, you chose exclusion, and you did it while representing my company, my name." He placed both hands on the marble counter, not leaning forward, but grounding himself. "So let me be very clear. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a training issue. This is a reflection of deeper bias. And it stops today." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Elijah raised a hand. "No more words. Not until we're done reviewing the footage. And not until Micah is welcomed properly into the lobby he never should have been forced to leave." He turned toward his son and motioned gently. Micah stepped forward, head held high, and walked back into the lobby, not with fear, but with quiet resolve. Rachel and Brian stepped aside, faces pale. Micah stood next to his father, looked around the room, and said softly, "I told the truth. You just didn't want to hear it." A hush fell over the room. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not status, not rank, not revenue, just a boy who had been dismissed and the father who had returned to make it right. And the room understood. Elijah Turner hadn't just walked into the hotel. He'd walked in to change it. Elijah Turner stood in the center of the Monarch Grand's marble lobby, his presence cutting through the room like a quiet storm, steady and unshakable. Behind him, Micah stood tall, shoulders back. No longer the boy who had been pushed out, but the young man who now held the truth on his side. A ring of hotel staff had gathered as instructed. Rachel Whitman, stiff and pale, Brian Colton, Wide-eyed and sweating, the two security guards who had escorted Micah out without asking a single question, and a handful of others who had watched in silence. Guests lingered along the edges of the room, pretending not to stare but unable to look away. Drawn to the tension hanging heavy in the air, Elijah's voice rose, not with anger but with unflinching calm, every word deliberate. "Before we continue," he said, his eyes sweeping the gathered staff, "can someone explain, clearly and publicly, why a 12-year-old guest, with a confirmed reservation, dressed appropriately, behaving respectfully, was removed from this lobby?" The silence that followed was long and suffocating. Rachel shifted uncomfortably, then finally spoke, her voice tight and brittle. "We were protecting the property. Mr. Turner, it's our policy to remove unaccompanied minors unless we can confirm their purpose." He looked suspicious. "Suspicious," Elijah repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Tell me, Ms. Whitman, what about him looked suspicious? His blazer? His manners? Or was it simply the color of his skin?" Her eyes dropped. "That's not what I meant," she whispered. "But that's what you did," Elijah said, never raising his voice. "You saw a child, and instead of seeing a guest, you saw a threat, and you used your authority to humiliate him." He turned slightly toward the other staff. "And the rest of you, what did you see? Did anyone stop to ask his name? Did anyone offer to call his father before asking security to intervene?" No one answered. Not Brian, whose hands fidgeted with the hem of his uniform jacket. Not the security guard who had called Micah sir with a forced smile as he ushered him out. Ava Chen, standing to the side with a tray still balanced on her hand, stepped forward then. "I saw it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I watched him walk in. He was polite. He said his father had a reservation. He didn't do anything wrong. I felt something was off." Elijah turned to her. "And you reported it, didn't you?" Ava nodded. "I messaged the Turner Group hotline. I didn't use my name, but I couldn't just stand by." "You did the right thing," Elijah said, his voice softening for the first time. "Integrity means speaking up even when it's uncomfortable." Then he turned back to Rachel and Brian. "This wasn't a one-time lapse. This was a failure of judgment, of character, and of responsibility, and it's not going to be swept under the rug." Just then, Harold Bennett stepped forward with a tablet in hand, screen displaying a paused security recording. "Mr. Turner, this is the footage from 4:16 p.m. It clearly shows Micah approaching the front desk. You'll see he never raised his voice, never wandered, and followed protocol exactly." Elijah gestured for Harold to play it. The lobby fell completely silent as the video played. There was Micah, entering calmly, walking straight to the desk, standing patiently. His small frame contrasted against the grandeur of the space, but his demeanor never wavered. The audio captured his words, clear and composed. "I'm here to pick up the key for the Turner reservation." Then Rachel's voice, sharp and dismissive. "You don't look like a guest." And finally, the cold, public instruction. "You need to leave, now." The playback stopped. No one spoke. The truth had spoken for itself. Franklin Ward, the VIP guest who had muttered a judgmental comment earlier, stepped forward then, slowly, his face red with shame. "Mr. Turner," he said, his voice strained, I owe your son an apology. I made assumptions, and I regret it deeply. I didn't know who he was, but that shouldn't have mattered." Elijah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Acknowledgement is the first step," he said. "Accountability doesn't begin with punishment. It begins with awareness." He turned back to Micah, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You stood tall. Son, you didn't get angry, even when they treated you unfairly. That takes more strength than most adults ever learn. Micah's eyes glistened slightly, but he held his chin up. We can't change how people see us, he said quietly, but we can change what we stand for. The words hung in the air, pure, honest, and echoing louder than any speech Elijah could have given. Harold stepped forward again. Effective immediately, he announced. Rachel Whitman and Brian Colton are suspended pending full review. Their conduct does not align with the values or standards of Turner Legacy Properties. Rachel gasped softly. Brian turned pale, but no one interrupted. Not this time. Guests began murmuring. A few clapped quietly, and for the first time that day, Micah felt something shift, not just in the room, but in the way he stood in it. He had walked into that lobby as a boy simply trying to pick up a key, but now, standing beside his father, he had become the reason that lobby would never be the same again. The silence that followed the announcement of Rachel Whitman and Brian Colton's suspension was heavier than any argument. No one clapped this time. No one whispered. It was the kind of quiet that comes only after something unspoken is finally said out loud. The kind of silence that demands everyone take a good, hard look at themselves. Elijah Turner stood motionless for a beat longer, then stepped aside as Harold Bennett took the lead, tablet still in hand. There is no footage showing misconduct from the guest, Harold confirmed, scrolling through timestamps. No wandering, no confrontation, no breach of policy. Micah approached the desk, introduced himself clearly, and was dismissed. Full stop. Brian lowered his gaze, clearly shaken, but said nothing. Rachel's face remained unreadable. No denial, no apology, just a tight jaw and a stiff posture that couldn't mask the humiliation sinking in. Elijah turned toward Micah, eyes softening. I want you to see this, he said quietly, motioning him toward the screen. Not because I want to relive it, but because I want you to know you were right. Sometimes the world will doubt you, even when you're doing everything right. But truth always finds its way. Micah leaned in, eyes fixed on the screen. He watched himself. Same posture, same voice, same calm. And yet, seeing it from the outside somehow made it feel more real. I didn't even look angry, he murmured. No, Elijah said. You looked like a young man trying to be heard. The tension in the room began to shift again. This time. It wasn't about outrage or defense. It was reflection. The slow, uncomfortable process of realizing how deep assumptions can run, and how easy it is to follow protocol instead of conscience. Then, quietly, but clearly, Ava Chen stepped forward again. Mr. Turner, she said, her voice less nervous now. If I may, I just wanted to say thank you. Not for coming here, but for seeing this through. A lot of us notice things we can't always name. It happens in little ways. A certain tone. A lack of eye contact. Who gets the benefit of the doubt, and who doesn't? She paused, then added, I've worked in hospitality since I was 18. I've never seen someone stand up like this, especially not a guest, or the owner. Elijah turned to her, gratitude plain in his eyes. Thank you, Ms. Chen. It's people like you who keep companies honest. Silent observers are how injustice thrives. But today, you didn't stay silent. You took a risk, and that speaks volumes. He looked over at Harold, who gave a subtle nod. Ava, Harold said, stepping forward. Effective next week. We'd like to offer you a promotion, Special Guest Relations Liaison. It comes with a pay raise and discretion to report any internal behavior that contradicts our values. You've proven your judgment. We trust it. Ava blinked, stunned. Thank you. I didn't expect. That's what makes it real. Elijah replied. You did it expecting nothing. Just then, Franklin Ward, The previously dismissive VIP guest stepped forward, no longer hiding behind awkward silence. "I owe you all something," he said. "Especially you. Young man." He looked at Micah directly. "I saw you walk in and I made a snap judgment. It was wrong. I thought I knew what this hotel should look like, who should belong. And now I realize that's the very problem. We think we're being neutral, but neutrality isn't justice. It's just comfort." He extended a hand toward Micah, not for show, not for optics, but sincerely. Micah hesitated, then shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir," he said. "It means something." Elijah watched the exchange with quiet pride. Then he turned toward the gathered staff once more. "This isn't about firing a couple of employees and moving on," he said. "This is about rethinking what we reward, what we ignore, and what we quietly allow. Every hotel in the Turner Legacy Group will undergo a mandatory ethics and empathy retraining program. Not just because of what happened to Micah, but because we will not allow this to happen to anyone else." He paused, letting that truth settle. Policies mean nothing if the people enforcing them don't see the guests as human first. If we're not practicing inclusion in the everyday moments, the check-ins, the glances, the decisions that feel small, then we're not practicing it at all. He turned back to Micah. "And you taught all of us that today." Micah gave a quiet smile, his voice steady. "I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to be let in." "You were already in, son," Elijah replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They just didn't see it. But now they do." As guests resumed moving about the lobby and the staff slowly returned to their posts, something unspoken had shifted in the room, like a curtain lifted, like light touching a place that had stayed dim for far too long. Micah didn't need to shout. He didn't need to fight. All he had to do was stand in the truth and let his father stand with him. And that, more than anything else, was what would be remembered. The next morning, the Monarch Grand Hotel lobby didn't feel quite the same. The light still streamed through the tall windows. The marble still glistened. The bellhop still smiled. But there was something different in the air. A quiet weight. A kind of awareness that hadn't existed the day before. Word had traveled quickly, not just through the hotel staff, but across the entire Turner Legacy Group. By sunrise, an internal company-wide memo had been circulated to all 147 Turner properties across the country, carrying the subject line, "The Micah Policy, Immediate Implementation Required," and with it came a shift that was more than procedural. It was personal. In that memo, Elijah Turner had laid out a new foundational standard: no guest, regardless of age, appearance, or background, would ever again be profiled, dismissed, or made to feel unwelcome. Every hotel staff member, from receptionists to top-level managers, would undergo new training focused not just on hospitality, but on humanity. It was no longer acceptable to follow protocol at the expense of dignity. Instead, staff would be evaluated on how they listened, how they showed respect, and how they recognized bias before it became policy. Micah's experience, the memo read, is not just a one-time failure, it is a mirror, and we will not look away. Back at the Monarch Grand, the fallout was swift. Rachel Whitman and Brian Colton were formally released from their positions, not with fanfare or drama, but with a clear and unapologetic explanation. Violation of company values and ethical service standards. They didn't speak to the media. They didn't return. But their absence was noticed, not as a loss, but as a lesson. In contrast, Ava Chen's promotion was announced with quiet pride during the morning briefing. Her new role, Special Guest Relations Liaison, came with a larger office, direct access to the executive team, and a mission: protect the human dignity of every guest who walked through the doors. You spoke up when it mattered, Elijah had told her in private. Now, you'll help make sure others know they can, too. At 11 o'clock, M sharp, Elijah held a video call with every general manager in the Turner network, streamed live from the Skyview Ballroom, the same space that, just 24 hours earlier, was being prepared for a birthday celebration that nearly didn't happen. Micah sat quietly off camera, watching the call unfold. He didn't speak during the meeting. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Elijah addressed the managers not as a CEO throwing down orders, but as a father who had seen firsthand what indifference looked like, and what it cost. We built this company to represent more than luxury, he said. We built it to be a place where people feel seen, where dignity is the standard, not an exception for VIPs, but the rule for everyone. He paused, letting his words settle across hundreds of screens. If we fail at that, then we've failed completely. After the meeting, the Skyview Ballroom was reset for the event it had been booked for all along, Dr. Micah Turner's surprise birthday celebration. A soft jazz trio played by the windows. Tables were dressed in navy linens and gold-trimmed china, and warm light bathed the room in a kind of glow that no chandelier could replicate. Camille, unaware of the drama from the day before, walked into a sea of family and friends who stood and sang happy birthday as she covered her mouth in surprise. Her eyes sparkled when she saw Elijah, but they filled with emotion when she spotted Micah across the room, holding a card and a small bouquet of blue hydrangeas. Her favorite. She hugged him tight, whispering, "You remembered." He smiled. "Of course I did." Elijah joined them moments later, resting a hand on her back. "You look beautiful," he said, then kissed her cheek. "And for the record, your son handled yesterday like a grown man." Camille raised an eyebrow. "What happened yesterday?" she asked. Concerned, Elijah glanced at Micah, who gave a tiny shake of his head. "Nothing you need to worry about today," Elijah said gently. "Let's just say your son helped this hotel grow up a little." As the celebration continued, laughter filling the ballroom, waiters bringing out slices of vanilla cake with raspberry filling, Micah stepped out to the edge of the balcony for a moment. He looked out over the Boston skyline, the city bathed in afternoon sun. For a moment, he just breathed. No weight, no tension, just the quiet peace of being seen and being believed. Elijah joined him a few moments later. They didn't speak right away. Then Elijah said, "You did good yesterday." Micah looked up. "I didn't really do anything." Elijah smiled. "You didn't shout, you didn't fight, but you stood your ground, and you spoke the truth. That's doing something." Micah nodded. Then after a pause, asked, "Do you think they'll really change?" Elijah looked out over the rooftops and said, "Some will, some won't. But now they know we're watching, and more importantly, you taught them how it feels to be watched unfairly. That's what plants the seed." Micah thought for a moment, then turned back toward the ballroom. "I'm not here to prove I belong," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "I'm here because I do." Elijah smiled again, eyes full of pride. "That's exactly right." And with that, father and son walked back into the celebration, not as guests, but as the reason the hotel had changed. And somewhere, deep within the walls of the Monarch Grand, a new foundation had been laid, not of stone or steel, but of truth, dignity, and a quiet, unshakable resolve. The kind that begins with one boy, standing tall in a lobby where he had once been told to leave. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching.